Hello, Carson. Let's go to your room.
Some villains in film are terrifying because they are unpredictable. Others are terrifying because they enjoy what they do. But every once in a while, a character appears who is frightening for a completely different reason. Not because he's chaotic, and not because he's emotional, but because he believes the violence he commits is simply the natural order of things. Anton Chigurh walks through No Country for Old Men like a man who believes the world has already made its decisions. The coin toss, the quiet footsteps in empty hallways, the calm voice asking a stranger to call a side of a coin they didn't even know was being flipped. To Chigurh, none of these moments are choices.
That's the way it is.
They are confirmations, evidence that every event in life has already been set into motion long before anyone realizes it. And that belief changes everything about the way he moves through the world. Because if the outcome was always inevitable, then responsibility becomes something very easy to ignore. Anton Chigurh doesn't think of himself as someone who chooses violence. He thinks of himself as someone who reveals it. And that might be the most unsettling idea in the entire film. When Anton Chigurh first appears in No Country for Old Men, he doesn't feel like a traditional villain. There's no dramatic entrance, no long explanation of his motives, no moment designed to convince the audience that this is the antagonist they should fear. Instead, he simply appears, quiet, focused, and immediately dangerous. Chigurh is introduced as a hitman tasked with recovering a suitcase of drug money that disappeared after a deal gone wrong along the Texas border. But the longer the story continues, the more it becomes clear that describing him as a hitman feels incomplete. Because most criminals operate with understandable motivations: money, status, revenge. Chigurh operates according to something else entirely: a philosophy. He believes that every action in life leads inevitably to the next, that the present moment is simply the result of countless decisions made long before anyone involved arrived there. And because of that belief, Chigurh doesn't see himself as someone making choices. He sees himself as someone carrying out a process that was already unfolding. A man who exists not to shape events, but to confirm them. This is why he moves through the story with such unsettling calm. He doesn't chase chaos. He doesn't react emotionally. He simply follows the chain of events to wherever it leads. And when that chain arrives at another human being standing in his way, he treats the outcome as something that was always meant to happen.
How'd you find that?
No, not that.
Most villains justify their actions by claiming they had no choice. They blame circumstance. They blame society. They blame the people who pushed them to the edge. Anton Chigurh takes that argument one step further. He removes the concept of choice entirely. To Chigurh, the world is a series of causes and effects stretching endlessly into the past. Every moment leading to the next. Every decision creating consequences that ripple forward through time. By the time two people meet in a quiet gas station or a dim motel hallway, the outcome has already been determined by everything that came before. This belief allows Chigurh to operate without hesitation, without guilt, without regret. Because if the outcome was inevitable, then he isn't responsible for it. He's simply the final link in the chain, the person who arrives at the moment where the consequences finally reveal themselves. But there's something deeply unsettling about that idea, because while Chigurh insists that fate controls everything, his actions suggest that he still sees himself as an enforcer of that fate, not a bystander, not a witness, but a participant who ensures the outcome arrives exactly as it should. And that contradiction begins to surface the longer the story continues. One of the most famous scenes in the entire film happens in a quiet gas station. Nothing dramatic is happening. No music swells, no weapons are drawn. Just a conversation between two men. One of them completely unaware that his life may depend on what happens next. The gas station owner tries to make small talk. He asks polite questions. He wonders where Chigurh is traveling from, but Chigurh's responses slowly change the tone of the interaction. The questions become more pointed, more strange, until eventually Chigurh pulls a coin from his pocket and places it on the counter.
Call it. Call it, yes. For what? Just call it.
The man hesitates. Call what? What exactly is being decided here? Chigurh doesn't explain. Instead, he tells the man that the coin has been traveling through time for 22 years. Passing from person to person, moment to moment, until finally arriving here. This moment, this place, this conversation, and now the man standing in front of him is simply part of that journey. The coin doesn't decide anything. The coin reveals what was always meant to happen. When the man guesses correctly, Chigurh lets him live, Not because he chose to spare him, but because in Chigurh's mind, the universe already decided. The coin simply confirmed it. But beneath that calm explanation hides a strange truth. Chigurh chose to flip the coin. He chose to bring it out. He chose to create the situation in the first place, which means the moment wasn't fate revealing itself. It was Chigurh constructing a system where he could pretend he wasn't responsible for the outcome. Throughout the film, Anton Chigurh insists that he operates according to rules, rules that separate him from the chaos of the world around him. Promises matter, consequences matter, actions lead to reactions. If someone breaks a promise, the outcome must follow. If someone interferes with his mission, the chain continues. From Chigurh's perspective, this creates a kind of moral structure, a system where every death has logic behind it, where nothing happens without reason. But that sense of order exists only because Chigurh enforces it. The universe doesn't demand these consequences, Chigurh does. And by convincing himself that he is merely following the rules of fate, he transforms personal decisions into something that feels inevitable, something that feels justified. Because when a person believes they are acting on behalf of a larger system, responsibility becomes much easier to ignore. History is full of examples of people who committed terrible acts while believing they were simply following orders, following rules, following the structure of the world they lived in. Anton Chigurh represents the most extreme version of that mindset. A man who believes that the universe itself has written the rules, and that his only role is to enforce them. The true philosophical opposite of Anton Chigurh isn't Llewellyn Moss, it's Sheriff Ed Tom Bell. Bell spends the entire story feeling as though the world around him has become unfamiliar. Violence feels more senseless. Crime feels more chaotic. The rules he grew up believing in no longer seem to apply. He watches the aftermath of Chigurh's actions and struggles to understand what kind of person could move through the world like this.
Think this boy Moss has got any notion of the sorts of sons of bitches that are hunting him?
I don't know, he ought to. He's seen the same things I've seen, and it certainly made an impression on me.
Someone who kills without anger, without desperation, without even the appearance of emotion. To Bell, this represents a world that no longer makes sense, a world where morality has eroded. But Chigurh sees the situation differently. From his perspective, nothing has changed at all. The world has always operated according to the same chain of cause and effect. The difference is that most people refuse to acknowledge it. Bell believes that human beings choose what they become. Chigurh believes those choices were made long before anyone realized they were making them, and the film never fully answers which perspective is correct. Instead, it quietly suggests something even more unsettling. Maybe both men are trying to explain a world that doesn't follow either philosophy, a world that simply unfolds without asking permission from anyone involved. One of the most disturbing qualities Anton Chigurh possesses is the way he appears completely detached from the violence he commits. There is no anger in his voice, no panic in his movements, no visible hesitation before he pulls the trigger or tightens his grip. He speaks calmly, moves deliberately, and carries out his actions with the quiet focus of someone completing a routine task. At first glance, this makes him appear almost mechanical, as if he lacks emotion entirely. But if you pay close attention, the emotion isn't missing. It's restrained. Chigurh reacts to disrespect. He becomes irritated when people waste his time. He grows impatient when someone refuses to acknowledge the consequences of their actions. But unlike most people, he refuses to let those emotions influence the outcome. Everything remains controlled, measured, precise, because allowing emotion into the equation would threaten the entire philosophy he lives by. Emotion implies doubt. It implies hesitation. It suggests that a different decision might have been possible, and if another decision was possible, then the outcome wasn't inevitable, which means Chigurh would have to acknowledge that he chose what happened next, so he suppresses it. He behaves like someone detached from the situation, but that detachment is not indifference, it's discipline, a carefully maintained emotional distance that allows him to continue believing that he is not responsible for the consequences of his actions. Because if Anton Chigurh ever allowed himself to fully experience what he was doing, the illusion of inevitability would collapse, and responsibility would take its place. Anton Chigurh often speaks about fate as if it were the ultimate authority, a force that stretches through time, connecting every event, every decision, every encounter, until eventually two people stand across from each other in a moment that feels unavoidable. But the longer you observe his actions, the more another pattern begins to emerge. Chigurh doesn't simply follow fate, he enforces it. He decides when the coin should be flipped. He decides when someone deserves a chance to call it. And when Carson Wells attempts to negotiate with him, there is no coin toss, no opportunity for destiny to intervene, just a quiet decision, a bullet fired without hesitation, which raises an uncomfortable question. If fate truly decides everything, why does Chigurh constantly step in to carry out its will? Why does he behave less like a witness to inevitability and more like the person responsible for ensuring it happens?
Is Carson Wells there?
Not in the sense that you mean.
The answer may lie in the way Chigurh views himself. He doesn't see himself as someone imposing violence onto the world. He sees himself as someone who understands the rules of the universe better than everyone else. Almost like a priest interpreting divine law. The coin toss becomes a ritual, a moment where the truth of fate reveals itself. But without Chigurh there to flip the coin, that revelation would never occur. Without Chigurh there to enforce the consequences, the chain would simply end, which means the man who claims to be fate's servant may actually be the one writing its rules. For most of the film, Anton Chigurh moves through the world like an unstoppable force.
Are you going to shoot me?
That depends. Do you see me?
Bullets miss him. Pursuers fail to catch him. Every situation bends toward the outcome he expects. It begins to feel as though his philosophy might actually be correct, as though fate truly is guiding the events of the story. But then something happens that no philosophy can fully explain. A car accident, sudden, random, unpredictable. Chigurh survives, but the moment breaks the illusion that he controls the chain of events. For the first time in the entire film, the universe interrupts him, not as part of a carefully constructed system, but as a reminder that randomness still exists. And in that moment, the man who claimed to understand fate becomes just another person caught in the chaos of the world. Anton Chigurh terrifies audiences not simply because he kills. Films are full of killers. What makes Chigurh unsettling is the way he explains his actions. He sounds calm, rational, almost philosophical, and that calmness forces the audience to confront an uncomfortable reality. Many terrible things in history were carried out by people who believed they were simply following the logic of the world around them. Following rules, following systems, following inevitability. The most dangerous individuals are rarely the ones who see themselves as villains. They are the ones who believe they are simply doing what must be done. Anton Chigurh doesn't think he's evil, he thinks he's honest, and sometimes that difference is more frightening than the violence itself. In the end, Anton Chigurh disappears back into the world, not defeated, not victorious, just continuing. And maybe that's the quiet message hidden beneath the story. People like Chigurh will always exist, individuals who believe that life is nothing more than a chain of consequences stretching endlessly through time, where responsibility is an illusion, where fate explains everything. But the truth may be much simpler than that. The universe doesn't flip coins, people do, and every time someone claims they had no choice, what they are often really saying is that they don't want to admit the choice was theirs.